You already know something is off. You have known for a while. You open your phone first thing in the morning and something tightens before your day has even started. You sit down to work and find yourself reaching for the app 17 times in an hour without deciding to. You end a long evening of scrolling feeling more tired than when you began. Not physically tired, but something harder to name. A kind of inner static. A restlessness that makes genuine rest feel just out of reach. You have read the articles. You have heard the advice. Put your phone in another room. Try a digital detox. Set screen time limits. And maybe you have tried some of those things. And maybe they helped briefly. And maybe they did not stick. Because the problem with most advice about technology and mental health is that it treats the symptom without understanding the system.
The previous episodes in this series explained what is happening in your brain when you scroll, why validation feels like survival, and how fear of rejection shapes what you put into the world. This episode is different. This episode is practical. This is where we move from understanding the problem to actually doing something about it. But the doing has to be grounded in the same neuroscience that explained the problem, otherwise it will not work. Willpower alone is not enough. You cannot out-discipline a nervous system that has been wired into a specific set of patterns over years of daily reinforcement. You need strategy, and the strategy has to work with your biology rather than against it. So let us start with what you are actually trying to regulate. Your nervous system has two primary operating modes, and you have heard these mentioned before in this series. The sympathetic state is your activation mode, the one associated with stress, urgency, threat detection, and mobilization. The parasympathetic state is your recovery mode, the one associated with calm, safety, connection, and repair. A healthy nervous system moves fluidly between these two states depending on what the situation genuinely requires. It activates when there is real demand, and it recovers when the demand has passed. The problem in a hyper-digital environment is that the sympathetic state gets chronically triggered by stimuli that feel urgent without being genuinely threatening, and the recovery process never fully completes because the stimuli never stop.
Notifications, feeds, news cycles, social comparisons, comment sections, all of it keeps the activation dial turned slightly up, all the time, so your nervous system never reaches the baseline it needs to actually restore itself. The clinical term for what many women are experiencing is chronic low-grade sympathetic activation, and its symptoms are deceptively easy to misattribute. Difficulty concentrating, irritability that seems disproportionate to its triggers, fatigue that sleep does not fully resolve, a persistent sense of restlessness or low-level anxiety even when circumstances are objectively fine. Trouble being fully present in conversations or experiences without your mind pulling toward the phone. These are not personality traits, they are physiological states.
And they are changeable, not through discipline alone, but through deliberate, consistent practices that give your nervous system the specific inputs it needs to shift out of chronic activation and back into genuine regulation. The first and most foundational practice is what neuroscientists and somatic therapists call completing the stress cycle. Researcher Bessel van der Kolk, along with Emily and Amelia Nagoski, have written extensively about this. The stress response, when it is triggered, is designed to complete. In the environment your nervous system evolved in, a threat would arise, your body would mobilize, action would be taken, and then the physiological stress response would discharge and resolve. The problem in the modern digital environment is that the triggers are constant, but the completion never happens. You read something upsetting, your nervous system activates, and then you just scroll to the next thing, carrying the undischarged activation forward. Then the next thing activates you again, and you carry that forward too. Over a day, over a week, over years, the cumulative undischarged stress becomes the static you live in. Completing the stress cycle requires physical movement, not necessarily exercise in the formal sense, though that works excellently, but any physical action that allows your body to process and discharge the activation that was generated. After a period of scrolling that left you feeling stirred up, a brisk 10-minute walk is not just a nice idea, it is a neurological intervention. It allows your sympathetic nervous system to complete the mobilization cycle it was primed for but never got to finish. Even something as simple as shaking your hands vigorously, taking several deep breaths with extended exhales, or doing 20 jumping jacks can meaningfully shift your physiological state. This sounds too simple to matter, and that is exactly why most people skip it. But the research is unambiguous. The body needs physical discharge to complete the stress cycle, and without it, the activation simply accumulates. Moving to the second strategy, which is about how and when you enter the digital environment, rather than just how you exit it. There is a concept in behavioral neuroscience called priming, which refers to how the initial stimulus you expose yourself to sets the tone for your entire subsequent experience. Your brain is always pattern matching, always drawing on recent context to interpret new information. When the first thing you expose your nervous system to in the morning is a flood of social comparison via news, notifications, and other people's carefully curated realities, you prime your threat detection system to be active before you have had any experience of your own day yet. You arrive at your morning already carrying someone else's metrics, someone else's highlight reel, someone else's noise, and everything that happens to you for the next several hours gets processed through that primed lens. This is why the first 30 to 60 minutes of your morning is the highest leverage period of your entire digital day. What you put into that window does not just affect those 30 minutes, it affects the baseline tone your nervous system carries for hours afterward. Women who build a consistent pre-digital morning ritual, even a modest one, report measurable differences in their anxiety levels, their ability to concentrate, and their general sense of agency throughout the day. The ritual does not need to be elaborate. It needs to be prior. Prior to the phone, prior to the feed, prior to the news. Something that is yours, something that grounds your nervous system in your own experience before you expose it to the volume and speed of the digital world. This could be 5 minutes of slow breathing, a cup of tea in silence, a short walk before the device comes out, writing 3 sentences in a journal. The specific form matters less than the function, which is anchoring your nervous system in the present moment and in your own body before you hand any of your attention to a platform that has been engineered to take as much of it as possible. The third strategy addresses something that rarely gets named in conversations about digital well-being, which is the specific neurological impact of notification architecture on your capacity for sustained attention. Every notification is a small interruption of your current state, a tiny redirect of your attention toward a potential social signal. And the research on attention interruption is stark. Studies by Gloria Mark at the University of California found that after an interruption, even a very brief one, it takes an average of 23 minutes for the brain to return to deep focus. This means that a day punctuated by dozens of notification checks is not a day in which you have functional access to your own deeper cognitive and creative capacities. You are skimming the surface of your own mind, being pulled away every few minutes before you have had time to go anywhere meaningful. Turning off non-essential notifications is not a minor lifestyle tweak. It is a cognitive sovereignty practice. When you allow your attention to be constantly interrupted by social signals, you are, at a neurological level, training your brain to expect and respond to interruption rather than to sustain its own direction. Over time, this erodes your capacity for deep focus, not just when you are on your phone, but in general. The attention span contracts, the tolerance for boredom decreases, the ability to sit with a thought long enough for it to develop into something meaningful diminishes. Women who work creatively, who need access to their own interior experience in order to do what they do, whether that is writing, designing, building a business, or simply being a present and thoughtful person in their relationships, are paying a particularly high price for this erosion, even when they cannot directly trace the cost. Think about a woman named Nadia. She is a graphic designer who could not understand why her creative work felt increasingly effortful and thin compared to what it had been 3 years earlier. She had not lost her skill, she had not lost her interest, but the quality of her ideas had quietly diminished, and the process of generating them felt less fluid, more forced. She attributed it to burnout, to aging, to the general difficulty of the creative life. It was only when she took a 2-week experiment where she turned off all notifications and worked in uninterrupted 90-minute blocks that she began to recognize what had changed. The quality of her creative output noticeably improved within days, not because she had rested or had a breakthrough, but simply because she had given her brain sustained, uninterrupted time to do what it needed to do. The attention had been there all along. It had just been too fragmented to function.
The fourth strategy is about creating what therapists and nervous system specialists call a regulation anchor, a specific sensory experience that your nervous system learns to associate with safety, calm, and return to baseline. This works through a process called classical conditioning, the same mechanism by which certain smells, songs, or places can instantly transport you to a specific emotional state. You can deliberately build this association by pairing a specific sensory input with a consistent relaxation practice. For example, if every time you do a slow breathing exercise, you also brew and drink a specific herbal tea, over time, the smell and taste of that tea alone begins to trigger a parasympathetic response. Your nervous system learns that this particular sensory combination means safety. It is a very simple and very powerful form of self-regulation, and it works particularly well in the context of digital overwhelm because it gives your body a clear physical signal that says, "We are done now. We are returning to ourselves." The sensory anchor does not have to be elaborate or ritualistic. It can be as simple as a specific scent, a particular kind of music played at low volume, a physical object you hold, a specific texture under your hands. The key is consistency. The same input, reliably paired with genuine downregulation over enough repetitions, becomes its own trigger for calm. Women who build this practice often describe feeling a shift within 30 seconds of engaging their anchor, not because of magic, but because of neuroscience. The nervous system is extremely responsive to learned safety signals. It wants to regulate. It just needs clear, consistent cues that it is safe to do so. Think about a woman named Nadia. She is a graphic designer who could not understand why her creative work felt increasingly effortful and thin compared to what it had been 3 years earlier. She had not lost her skill, she had not lost her interest, but the quality of her ideas had quietly diminished, and the process of generating them felt less fluid, more forced. She attributed it to burnout, to aging, to the general difficulty of the creative life. It was only when she took a 2-week experiment where she turned off all notifications and worked in uninterrupted 90-minute blocks that she began to recognize what had changed. The quality of her creative output noticeably improved within days, not because she had rested or had a breakthrough, but simply because she had given her brain sustained, uninterrupted time to do what it needed to do. The attention had been there all along. It had just been too fragmented to function. The fourth strategy is about creating what therapists and nervous system specialists call a regulation anchor, a specific sensory experience that your nervous system learns to associate with safety, calm, and return to baseline. This works through a process called classical conditioning, the same mechanism by which certain smells, songs, or places can instantly transport you to a specific emotional state. You can deliberately build this association by pairing a specific sensory input with a consistent relaxation practice. For example, if every time you do a slow breathing exercise, you also brew and drink a specific herbal tea, over time, the smell and taste of that tea alone begins to trigger a parasympathetic response. Your nervous system learns that this particular sensory combination means safety. It is a very simple and very powerful form of self-regulation, and it works particularly well in the context of digital overwhelm because it gives your body a clear physical signal that says, "We are done now. We are returning to ourselves." The sensory anchor does not have to be elaborate or ritualistic. It can be as simple as a specific scent, a particular kind of music played at low volume, a physical object you hold, a specific texture under your hands. The key is consistency. The same input, reliably paired with genuine downregulation over enough repetitions, becomes its own trigger for calm. Women who build this practice often describe feeling a shift within 30 seconds of engaging their anchor, not because of magic, but because of neuroscience. The nervous system is extremely responsive to learned safety signals. It wants to regulate.
It just needs clear, consistent cues that it is safe to do so. Think about a woman named Rosa. She had followed a particular fitness creator for 2 years, telling herself it was motivating. When she finally did the body awareness audit described above, she realized that she never once left that account feeling energized. She always left it feeling like her body was wrong. She had dressed the shame as motivation for so long that she could not see it clearly until she deliberately checked in with what was actually happening in her chest each time she watched those videos. She unfollowed the account on a Tuesday afternoon and reported feeling by Wednesday morning a measurable lightness she had not realized was missing. This is what intentional curation actually does. It is not about curating for comfort or avoiding challenge. It is about reclaiming authorship over what gets access to your nervous system. The sixth and final strategy in this episode is perhaps the most counterintuitive, and it is this: scheduled boredom. Deliberate, protected periods of time where you do nothing that provides external stimulation. No podcast, no music, no scrolling, no content. Just your own mind, in whatever state it naturally arrives in. This is deeply uncomfortable for most women who have been in chronic digital stimulation for years, because the nervous system that has been conditioned to receive constant input experiences the absence of that input as a kind of withdrawal. The first few minutes of genuine quiet feel restless, almost unbearable, but this is exactly why it matters. The discomfort you feel in those first minutes is the sensation of your nervous system recalibrating, remembering what its own signal actually feels like without the noise. Boredom is not wasted time. It is the state in which your brain's default mode network, the neural system responsible for creativity, self-reflection, emotional integration, and meaning-making, activates most fully. Your best ideas do not come when you are stimulated. They come in the shower, on a slow walk, in the quiet before sleep. These are the moments when your default mode network has space to run its natural processes. And those natural processes are essential. They are how you make sense of your experiences, integrate your emotions, consolidate your identity, and generate the internal clarity that makes everything else in your life function better. Regulation is not a weekend retreat. It is not a detox you do once and return from renewed. It is a daily practice, a set of consistent, deliberate choices about how you relate to the digital environment and what space you protect for your own nervous system to breathe. None of these 6 strategies requires you to abandon your phone or opt out of the world. They require you to stop being a passive recipient of whatever the platform decides to deliver, and to become, instead, the one who decides. That shift from passive consumption to active authorship of your own sensory environment is not just a wellness practice. It is the foundation of everything that comes next in this series. Because you cannot build a real identity, a real voice, a real presence in the digital world from a nervous system that is chronically dysregulated. You have to regulate first. Then you can build. If you are going to try even one of these strategies this week, leave the word regulate in the comments. Just that one word tells me this landed, and it helps this series find the women who are ready to do the real work. Subscribe, because the next episode goes somewhere that requires everything we have built here, and where we are going is worth staying for.